Hey everyone, you're live with Necee. I am your host, Opal Bailey. Today on my Health and Journey to Healing segment, I have with me Dr. Stan Sherman, who is a surgeon at Wilsoff Medical Hospital here in Rockledge, Florida. Good morning, Dr. Stan.
Good morning.
Thank you again for coming on our show. I know that your time is very valuable.
It's my pleasure.
I appreciate it. I just want to start off by letting my listeners know how I know you. And I met you through your wife and Miss Carol, and I met her by her sharing some medical advice with me because she's a doctor as well. When it came to my daughter being in, having a chronic illness and everything, and I needed some assistance and some help in finding out where to go and what to do. And Dr. Carol guided us in the right direction, and therefore, I met her, I met you, and we're here today. So I just want to start off by asking you, what motivated you to become a surgeon?
That's actually a kind of a long, involved story.
Okay.
I was not one of those people who always, quote unquote, wanted to be a doctor. I actually studied biomedical engineering when I was in college and was somewhat interested in the medical field, but had not really decided that I was going to be a doctor until after I got finished with that. And then Carol actually went to medical school before I did, and I was helping her with her studies and found that it was really very interesting to me, and my interest grew. And then I had an opportunity to go to medical school at the Oklahoma State University. And I felt like that was the way God was leading us. And so I went and talked to them and was accepted within a month, which is pretty unusual. Usually people plan that kind of, a long time in advance, and there's a long interview process. But God sort of just put all that in place for us. And so that's how I started my medical training. I was always interested in surgery, but at the time when I graduated medical school, we were just starting our young family. We had young children, and I didn't see how I could do a surgery residency and still do all the things that I needed to do. Carol was in residency at that time also. So at that time, I actually did a family practice residency, and then I taught at the university for several years. And then as the kids began to get older, I began thinking about surgery again, and I went and talked to one of my friends that was the director of the surgery residency there, and just said, do you think it's be too late for someone like me to go back and do surgery? And really, I hadn't even anticipated what the process would be at that point. But basically, at the time when I went and talked to him, he said, well, I'm going to find out in a couple weeks whether I have a position available for next year. Do you want that position if I have it? And I had already, going back a little bit when I was beginning to think about surgery again, at first I thought it was kind of a ridiculous idea, but it just was one of those sort of pestering ideas that wouldn't go away. Mm-hmm. And so, and one day I remember I was praying about that, and I sort of made a deal with God, which that's always a dangerous thing to do. But I was just praying that day, and I was like, Lord, this surgery thing is, I just can't uproot my family and go move somewhere and go through this whole process of, starting over again as a surgery resident. So if that's really something that you have for me to do, then you'll need to just work it out where I can just stay right here and do it and not have to, make all these other things happen. So basically when he said, if I have this position right here, starting in a few months, do you want it? I had already kind of told the Lord that I would. So I said, well, yes. And so that's how I started my surgical training. In medical school, surgery was always the most fascinating to me of the medical fields. I found it much more interesting than some of the other areas that involve medications and, bacteria and germs and all that stuff was kind of secondary to me. But the surgery part of it, I did find much more engaging and really interesting.
Well, what was it about it that you found so much, interest in it other than the rest of them? Was it because what?
Well, the surgery is more mechanical, I would say. In other words, when I deal with surgical problems, a lot of times I'm dealing with a problem that I can actually see the problem, and I say, okay, this is the problem, and I'm going to do this and fix it. And that's the part of it that I really enjoy, is to be able to analyze the problem and then take care of the problem and then have it be actually fixed, as opposed to other areas of medicine where you deal with a lot of chronic illnesses and you say, well, you have this symptom and we're going to give you this medication and then you'll feel a little bit better, and then if you don't feel better, then you would try this other medication and see if that one makes you feel better. And surgery is much more decisive to me, to say, well, your appendix is inflamed and infected, and we can take it out and you'll be okay tomorrow. But if we leave it in there, then you're going to be sick for weeks and maybe die. And so I like that sort of decision-making of saying, all right, let's get this taken care of and let's do it today and you'll be better.
Wow, that's really good. That's really good. You want to just get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's awesome. What is the biggest health concern that you have today, in your opinion, regarding different kind of surgeries that you had to perform? What do you think that one of the most problematic surgery that you've had?
A lot of cancer surgery. And so I don't know. I mean, in terms of problematic, it's a problematic disease.
Mm-hmm.
I don't so much think of it as a problematic surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But just because of the nature of my practice, I see a lot of that. And so that's one of the things where sometimes we can cure a cancer with surgery and sometimes we can't. And so that makes it more problematic for me.
So how do you deal with being able to perform a surgery procedure knowing that, we can't really cure it? How do you deal with that as a surgeon, as a person, after you've done that process?
Well, I try to do surgeries that are going to help people. And so, and I'll tell patients that. I'll say, this is the surgery that's being offered, and I think it will help you. And so, for instance, I may have a patient with a cancer of their intestines that cannot be cured, but it's producing an intestinal blockage, which causes them to be vomiting and have a lot of pain. You say, even though the cancer is incurable, we can do this procedure to at least allow you to eat again. And so to do them at least some benefit. And then in terms of cancer, there's the medical side of cancer as well. And so then those patients will go see the oncologist to see, is there chemotherapy that can help? Is there radiation that can help? There's different things. So it's not always going to be surgery, even though the cases that I enjoy the most are the ones where the surgery is curative. Mm-hmm. But I have to recognize that that's not going to be in every case. But I try to do surgeries only if it will offer a true benefit to the patient.
That's awesome. I heard that you do something different than other doctors before you have surgery. I know that you are a Christian man, and I heard that you pray. I don't know if you pray before or pray with your patients, but tell us about that.
Well, I do offer to pray with all my patients before surgery, and the whole aspect of praying and acknowledging that God has the final authority in what's going on. In fact, early in my medical career, I struggled with this a little bit because I said, well, we should just pray for everybody for God to just heal them, and then they don't have to have surgery. And we all would like for that to be the case. But as I've grown and as I've seen, the way God works in the world, I like to use this analogy of a glass of water, because if I come to you and I have a glass of water and you're thirsty and you say, Dr. Sherman, I'm so thirsty, and I'm holding my glass of water, and I say, well, let's pray and see if God will take away your thirst. Mm-hmm. Well, no, that's not right, because I have the glass of water, so I should share that with you. And that's how I feel about medicine. So when you come to me with a surgical problem, and God has given me the training and the experience to be able to solve that problem, then if I say to you, let's pray that your problem will go away, and I'll just keep my surgery, over here to myself and not share it with you, well, that would not be right. Mm-hmm. But it's God who guides my hands, and it's God who's the one who provided me with the training and the knowledge to be able to do that. So I always acknowledge, that really it's Him.
So do you have a really good reception of that when you have your patients before you, and are they receptive of you praying for them? Or?
Most people seem actually very grateful, and I've had a lot of people tell me that they really felt a peace, that a lot of their nervousness about the surgery was relieved as we prayed and asked God to be there with us. Occasionally, I'll have someone who just says, "No, I don't really believe in that," and they'll say, "No, thank you," and that's okay. I still pray after they've gone to sleep. I pray, but but yeah, that's it's. I would say that it's actually somewhat rare for people to not be interested in that. In fact, I had one man who was an atheist, and so I said, would you like to pray? And he said, well, I'm an atheist, and I said, well, I guess that means you don't really want to pray. And he said, well, no, I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah.
So he still wanted to pray, even though he was a professed atheist.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because, we really do want help. Sometimes it's hard for us to ask for.
That's right. Yeah.
But we really do want help. And you just reminded me of the importance of being at ease in surgery, because I had surgery years ago, and I was so nervous and so anxious, in the process, because I didn't really know what you knew what the surgery was for, but you didn't kind of know how to handle it. I know you know what I mean and stuff like that, but it's good to know that you're addressing not only their physical, but also their spiritual as well. That's really good. That's really good. How do you handle your own health in the process of taking care of other people? What do you do to continue to maintain your physical health?
Well, I think there's certain things that are important for everyone, and I don't do this as well as I'd like to, but one of the key things is exercise. Mm-hmm. And, it can be challenging to find time to do that when you have a hectic schedule. But even just, 15 minutes a day, if you can cut out that time to get physical exercise, I think that's beneficial pretty much for everyone. And I try to do that several times a week. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's very important is our eating habits. And, people really get hung up sometimes on all different diets and what food should you eat or not eat. But the most important thing is very simple. It's just to not eat too much. And that's for everyone, for physical and mental functioning. I mean, it's been very well shown that that's one of the main things people can do to impact their own health.
Wow. That's totally different from what we've been taught, doctor. We've been taught, take this diet, get this, eat this, stop drinking this, and doing this, and to just hear you break it down, just simple, don't overeat, eat in portions, and eat smart, and exercise. That's really good. Thank you. That's pretty cool. So how do you handle your hours, the hours of surgery? Is it based on your scheduling of surgery, or are you on call constantly, or do you have...
Well, different practices will have that set up in different ways. In my practice, we have several physicians, and we take turns being on call. And so there's not any one person has to be on call all the time. And that's even individualized somewhat within the practice, because if I say, I have this person I'm worried about,